Your Excellency, 30 years ago, one of the most gruesome and horrific crimes in modern history took place in Srebrenica. In fact, Bosnia was engulfed in a war and conflict that left untold numbers, tens of thousands killed, a society ravaged. And today, we mark the 30th anniversary of what became known as the Srebrenica Memorial Day. A crime the likes of which very few can compare. And it happened in a country, I have to say, when I visited and I toured, I saw the natural beauty, which is absolutely mesmerizing. It's very difficult to align with the stories that countless people are willing to tell you about until now. When I was in Sarajevo, every taxi driver I was with told me about those days. You know, a few taxi drivers would always point to the very big junction in the middle of Sarajevo where it was basically, Assassination Alley. You know, it was sniper alleyway where countless of people perished because they were trying to cross that particular junction. What would your own reflections be now that we are 30 years on from that? What do you remember of those days? And how far along do you think that we have moved in Bosnia as well as the world in understanding what's happened, the veracity of what happened?
Yeah, I mean, first I want to say that I was born in Sarajevo. I'm coming from family with roots in Sarajevo. I was grown up there, educated there, having friends. My job was there. And simply, Sarajevo, as I remember from that period, was open city. City, multi-ethnic city in its nature, where Muslims, Bosniaks, Croats, Catholics, Serbs, Orthodox, Jews were living together and living in good relations, traditionally in good relations. I remember from my grandfather, father, mother, all those from my family talking about friendships and relations with people belonging to other communities, religious or ethnic communities. And when, as a reflection of overall crisis and relations in former Yugoslavia, situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina started to deteriorate in early 90s. It was difficult for us to accept that something like that could happen in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
People were living side by side, literally.
We simply didn't believe in it. And when news came about some incidents or conflicts at the border of Bosnia and Herzegovina, somehow we tend to believe it's there, it can't come here.
Yeah.
But then it comes to the outskirts of Sarajevo
itself, closer and closer.
Coming closer and closer. Then you say it's there, it can't be here. And suddenly, the moment you see or you hear explosions of mortars, shells, just close to a place where you live or work, and you see buildings of the company you work for being burned, and you see people being killed, even in your own family. And that was really very, very difficult for me and also most people living there to accept. I also want to say that while one group, as usually in such situations, one group of people are working, thinking about the future in a positive way, how to achieve something, how to develop something, make progress, resolve some issues, problems. The other, in the same time, the other group of people were thinking how to destroy something. I remember coming to the job in my office, being focused on some issues I was working on at that time. I opened radio listening to news, and the news first information was about destroying bridge on the river, border river of Bosnia and Herzegovina, or such explosions on destruction. So, I mean, one big lesson from all that is to monitor situation and to detect what's happening around and react early.
What was your work back then?
I studied mathematics, and I was mostly in IT sector in that period. So I was working at that time for one big company called UNIS, and everybody will recognize those towers in center of Sarajevo belonging to that company. I was working there as manager in IT sector.
One of the very starking points that stand out when going back to those very dark days is how Bosnia was, for a very long while, virtually left on its own. I mean, even its neighbours, it's, the international community, which by then had developed its, the media that was 24 hours news rolling and instant coverage and the like. It seemed that Bosnia was sort of left to face its own problems on its own.
Yeah. I mean, there were talks, negotiations on the future of countries from Yugoslavia when it became apparent that Yugoslavia cannot continue as it was. And Slovenia, Croatia specifically opted for independence. Question was, what's the future for Bosnia and Herzegovina? And being in specific situation, we were trying to find solution for Yugoslavia, for the future of Yugoslavia, to keep it together in a way. But from Slovenia, Croatia, they were pressing for independence. And in many opinions, that independence came too early before deciding and agreeing on the future for Bosnia and Herzegovina. We were advised by a European community at that time that we should hold referendum on the future, and so we did. But Serbs were opposed.
Yeah.
And Serbia itself was opposed to such referendum and independence of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And when a referendum showed that overall majority of population in Bosnia and Herzegovina were in favor of independence, then they organized siege of Sarajevo and war overall in Bosnia and Herzegovina. International community was involved. European community was involved, but obviously was not ready for such development and was not ready to react to what was started to happen
incredible
there.
Because
media were present, as you said, and I think it was in many ways thanks to media that after so much suffering, destruction, and so many years, at the end, international community decided to intervene and bring such destruction to the end.
I mean, it seems quite remarkable how a country that is so diverse, that has, is multi-ethnic, and rather than that being a source of richness, that diversity, that it became its major Achilles heel. It became, the problem, because it was those communities that all of a sudden turned against the country.
Yeah, I can't accept that country is a problem as such. Problem are people who adopted hard nationalism as their ideology. Those who were enjoying all the benefits of living and developing their life and careers in Sarajevo turned against it.
Yeah.
Went to the hills and started shelling and killing, destructing the city in which they made their careers in the best possible ways. Sarajevo was really open city for everybody. It benefited from such openness, and all those people were benefiting from such openness. But then some of them adopted, as I say, hard nationalism as the ideology.
For what objective? For what end?
Gaining territory, having domination of their ethnic groups on other ethnic groups, and so on. I mean, for me, it's difficult to understand and accept.
Do you think they were pushed by outside elements, by foreign elements?
There was ideology developed in Serbia at that time in the Academy of Sciences, Media. Milosevic was president of Serbia, was promoter of such policy. All that, I mean, it was really period movement which had quite support in population. It was created. Yeah. I mean, it's not just like that day. It's being created, and in Bosnia and Herzegovina paid the price.
And, you know, it's the stories that you hear from people who lived through those times. And, you know, one of the things that I probably heard tens, if not more than 100 stories from different people about their own experiences. And, but one thing that kept occurring, and I would say in overall the majority of those conversations I had, was the level of hurt people would express when talking about their next door neighbors, whom they grew up with, they played when they were children with, they looked after their children, and they were door to door for years, for decades. And yet they became, at 1 second, one flip of a switch, they became their worst enemy, and they became ultimately the murderers of their own children.
Yeah, people felt betrayed, definitely. And feeling, dominant feeling was search for justice in all that. What was happening, such destruction, such surprise. Suddenly you see your neighbor, as you said, living next door, disappears. Where is he? You later recognize somewhere on the hill. They recognize probably such people involved in military units, involved in shelling, in bombing, in killing, sniping, and so on. And it was really difficult to accept and understand in all that. But one feeling developed after all that was search for justice, for the wider community, international community, to know what was happening, who did what in such situation.
30 years on, do you think the justice has been achieved, even if partially?
Yeah, what we were asking for from the beginning was establishment of justice, and specifically International Criminal Tribunal for Bosnia, for former Yugoslavia, was established great extent on our request. In spite of many problems connected with starting of work, financing and so on, it started to work, and it brought to justice number of those involved in serious crimes in former Yugoslavia and specifically in Bosnia and Herzegovina. But yeah, that picture, overall picture, I would say is mixed, at least with me. Somehow, yes, you recognize that number of people were found guilty, sentenced, and so on. On the other side, you don't have feeling of justice. And then you recognize this is court, and that's story about law, not always about justice. Yeah. It's about law. And legal battle was held there, and that legal battle resulted in number of those, as I said, convicted, and some of them are still in jails serving their sentences. But one result of the work of International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia is documentation.
Yeah.
Is witnesses, statement of witnesses of what was happening. And that remains for the future. And when you look at those millions of pages,
Yes.
video statements, audio statements, and so on, for everybody who is interested in studying what was happening in former Yugoslavia, and specifically in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in 90s, they will start from that archive. And it's written there. And I think that's big result. And it should be one part of satisfaction for the victims. But it's true that some of those who were involved in crimes are still free, walking around, and victims of their crimes are seeing them, meeting them every day,
Yeah.
and that's painful.
Yeah.
And not only the fact that they are free and walking around, but the fact that some of those are glorified as heroes by their ethnic community. And that's something that not only we in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but generally international community, we all need to work more on.
Yeah.
Because it's peace, certainly in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but peace without justice,
Yeah.
without recognition of what was happening in the past, can't be solid peace.
I take immense pride in that. The Cordoba Foundation, we worked from the mid-2000s to bring some sort of memorial of the massacre that happened in Srebrenica. And I recall for the first probably 4 years, and particularly my managing director, I mean, he's the one to be credited on this, Dr. Abdullah Faliq. His attempts to merely raise this issue were belittled, were laughed off, were seen as futile. And despite the many attempts, especially with the former Mufti of Bosnia, as well as many other officials and friends from within the EU, it was seen as a futile attempt to even create some sort of memorial of the victims. No real form of justice, no form of compensation to the victims. No, just so that we recall what's happened. We recall that there was thousands of young men as well as children, boys,
Yes.
who were killed on that particular day, and amongst a catalogue of massacres and crimes that were committed over the course of many, many years. But by the grace of Allah and immense effort and it came true. Now we have every single year on the 11th of July, we have the entire world commemorating Srebrenica. It's not justice, but at least it tells the world, it informs the younger generations who were not born then or do not remember, that a crime, the magnitude of this, did actually occur, and where it occurred in Europe, in the West. It didn't occur in some African backward country or some Asian,
Far
swamp
away,
or whatever. It happened in Europe. Does this, in your mind, does this bring some sort of comfort to the modern history of Bosnia?
Yes, last year General Assembly of United Nations also adopted resolution on genocide in Srebrenica, calling for all nations to commemorate 11th of July and remember victims and offer consolation to their families. But that example that you are mentioning shows that how difficult it can be, but also that we should not stop at the first step. as people say here, for evil to prevail, it's enough for good men to do nothing.
Absolutely.
So we have to do more. We have to be of those who are doing something, and whatever is necessary to prevent evil to take over situation. I am happy to say that in this country, in the United Kingdom, there were very impressive results in explaining and learning and educating people what was happening in those years and what lessons have been learned from all of that. So we have roughly 250,000 people educated through formal programs. We have thousands of people who in organized way visited Srebrenica Memorial Complex and Bosnia and Herzegovina. We have a number of events every year on Srebrenica and genocide which was happening there, with support of government, with involvement of all parts of society here. And that's something where United Kingdom can be example for all other countries.
In my visit to Bosnia, which was an eye-opener, because I had watched from afar and I had heard the news, I would claim that we tried in as much as possible, and especially in terms of aid and relief and charity and the such. But the stories were coming in and they were heartbreaking. And then I managed a few years ago to visit Sarajevo for the very first time. And I had the privilege of going to the museum now, where I'm told that an old Bosnian lady, she basically allowed her house to be the base from which the siege of Sarajevo was broken. An incredible structure, an ingenuity of the most magnificent sort. And that, to me, is something that brings alive to any visitor, to someone who doesn't know what actually happened, the horrors of those, and what needed to happen in order for those horrors to stop or to be broken. But let's talk about Bosnia today, because Bosnia is in one of the most important regions in the entire world. And it's in a location where it, in a way, is a bridge between Europe and the East. It's an overwhelmingly Muslim nation. But it's not without its challenges. It's not without its challenges, whether it be internal, regional, or even international. Tell me, what do you think are the main challenges that face Bosnia today?
Yeah, I can go back to the first days after peace agreement was reached for Bosnia and Herzegovina.
The Dayton Agreement.
Dayton Peace Agreement. This year we also mark the 30th anniversary of peace agreement. And that's a moment when we reflect on the past, but also think about the future. And I remember in that period, we started talking, those who were warring parties, the people from three sides, they got together and started talking about the future. Signed that peace agreement was accepted. Slowly, movement of people started to be established. People started traveling throughout the country. Return of properties happened throughout the Bosnia and Herzegovina. So previous property were returned to previous owners. All that. Not some of them decide to return.
Did Bosnia have to go through a period of transitional justice?
Yes, there was transformation of justice system. So formally, how shall we call it, the period of transitional justice? But there were serious reforms of justice systems and development of the system that was agreed in Dayton agreement, peace agreement for Bosnia and Herzegovina in that sector specifically. So thinking about the future, we easily agreed on several things. First, to have good relations with our neighbor, to work to establish and keep good relations with our neighbors. In our case, Serbia, Croatia, Montenegro. Then to work towards a system of United Nations. Bosnia and Herzegovina became member of the United Nations in '92, continued that membership, and to be constructive and good part of the UN and its system of organizations, agencies. We succeeded, I need to say, to be even members of Security Council in one period in the last years. So we also agreed to work on reconstruction of the country. After such destruction which happened during war, we needed to work jointly with assistance from international community and so on. But we also could agree on the future for Bosnia and Herzegovina in, as we said, Euro-Atlantic integrations, meaning European Union and also NATO. So that was quite attractive idea. That was period of enlargement of European Union,
Yes.
movement towards Central Eastern Europe and Balkans, countries of former Yugoslavia plus Albania were also of interest for the European Union, and all of them showed interest to join European Union. So we started working on that. It's connected with development of institutions, adopted of legislation, implementing of such legislation, and so on. Overall process which itself benefited for the country, but through that process, in my feeling, some more confidence among actors within Bosnia and Herzegovina were developing and establishing. And also better relations among countries involved in that process, where you are together in some activities, you share experiences, lessons learned, and so on in that way, knowing more about other people involved, and they know more about you. That's overall positive process. So certain progress was achieved, was for Bosnia and Herzegovina specifically stabilization association agreement with European Union was signed. We got visa-free travel to countries included in Schengen system, which is very important.
Of course.
For young people, business people, and so on, overall links. But in spite of having formally candidate status and decision of European Union to open negotiations on full membership in European Union, we are now stuck. We are stuck with adoption of legislation specifically on in legal sector, judiciary sector in Bosnia and Herzegovina. One reason is opposition of Republika Srpska, and specifically President Mr. Dodik of Republika Srpska, for adoption of such legislation. And it's not only opposition to further development of that sector, it's opposition to the existing court and judicial institutions on the level of state of Bosnia and Herzegovina. He was actually sentenced by court of Bosnia and Herzegovina to 1 year in prison and 6-year ban of performing public duties. And that process is ongoing. We expect in next period decision of the court of second instance in that case. But he ignores decision of the court. He wants to forbid activities of court and police institutions of state of Bosnia and Herzegovina on territory of Republika Srpska, which is part of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And all that creates crisis, which is constitutional crisis, not seen in this 30-year period after peace agreement was seen. International community monitors and is informed, and they know about such developments. They expect domestic institutions of Bosnia and Herzegovina to perform their duties. And let's see what will be decision of the court in second instance and how that will develop.
In light
overall.
of the gradual but unfortunately sure rise of far-right elements throughout Europe, and in many cases arriving in either parliaments or even in government offices, how is this impacting the issue of nationalism within Bosnia? I mean, do we see a return or a rise in the level of nationalist rhetoric or even politics maybe? And how is that impacting the internal stability of the country?
I think that's really the issue. On one side, you have offer of European Union for further progress to full membership, connected with substantial funds, billions of euros for Bosnia and Herzegovina. On the other side, you have forces of the past, hard nationalism, which prevents such progress. So yes, nationalism is present and prevents progress of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Unfortunately, there is support from some European countries, even members of European Union, for Mr. Dodik and Republika Srpska overall, which prevents joint action of European Union as a whole regarding imposition of sanctions towards Mr. Dodik. But there are sanctions of United States, there are sanctions of United Kingdom, and recently there are on bilateral basis sanctions of some countries, members of the European Union, including Austria, Germany, Poland, Lithuania, and others.
The extremely rich history of Bosnia, a few centuries ago, part of the Ottoman Empire, but being where it is, also a European nation through and through. How does this multi-identity, how does this sit within the Bosnian nation? Is it something that is taken comfortably, easily, or does it create some sort of inner sort of crisis or quarrel even?
I think in Bosnia and Herzegovina it's accepted as something normal. We were born and raised in such environment, all of us. And it was really mixed society. It was not society where communities are living side by side.
Yes.
It's mixed in normal life, real life, in work, in education, and all that. But sometimes it's a surprise for observers, for those who are coming from outside. They don't expect something like that. Specifically, for example, for Muslims from Bosnia and Herzegovina, we are Europeans, we are white. It comes as a surprise for some people in Europe when you say, I am Muslim. How are you Muslim if you are not brown or black? I mean, that's something that we are occasionally faced with, presenting our identity and religious background to Europe. But that's something which enriches Europe. And there is talk about whether European Union wants to accept country where Muslims are majority, and how we should react to that. I personally, being involved in this process of joining European Union for many years, believe that European Union will accept and wants to accept Bosnia and Herzegovina with Muslim majority, provided we fulfill technical conditions, because it enriches European Union itself and shows readiness of European Union to work and involve others. Bosnia and Herzegovina as such can only contribute to richness of European Union and all organizations where we are already included with our experiences.
And how about its connections on the official level, but also in terms of the popular level with the Muslim world. For instance, the OIC, where does Bosnia stand in terms of the OIC? And how does an ordinary Bosnian see themselves within the context of, this construct that we speak about sometimes called the Ummah, that reaches as far east as Indonesia and as far west as as Morocco, for instance, or even Bosnia.
On the west, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, where does the Bosnian nation fit in all of this?
First, Bosnia was supported by OIC countries substantially and significantly during whole period, and all sympathy and support of population and governments was on Bosnian side. Some people say that that was one of the issues where OIC was in agreement, in all countries included there. We participate in those meetings. Recently, our foreign minister took part in meetings in Turkey of the OIC, and OIC itself regularly adopts their statements or resolutions on situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Turkey, as member state of the OIC, is included in what's called Peace Implementation Council Steering Board in Bosnia and Herzegovina, representing OIC countries there. So yes, there is close link between all those countries and Bosnia and Herzegovina because of those religious links.
Yes.
I would say we have number of people who were educated in number of those Muslim countries,
especially in Egypt,
in
Azhar.
Egypt, Turkey,
Malaysia.
Number of Malaysia, yes, very much, and others. And we have developing business links, and last year also substantial tourism. Many people from Arab countries, Islamic countries are coming to visit Bosnia, and many of them are actually buying properties in Bosnia and Herzegovina, enjoying nature, enjoying climate, mountains, rivers, lakes. Bosnia and Herzegovina is really beautiful.
It's one of the most naturally beautiful countries I've ever seen in my life. Yeah, it's amazing. How about, for instance, NATO? Is Bosnia interested, or does it look forward to joining alliances such as on that particular level, on a defense level?
Yes. NATO is one of the organizations we officially want to join, although in last period there is again opposition of Republika Srpska and specifically President of Republika Srpska, Mr. Dodik. But it's written in our law on defense, and we are working closely on developing defense structures with NATO and compatible, in a way compatible with NATO rules. So NATO is present in Bosnia and Herzegovina these days, not in so big numbers as it used to be immediately after the war. There were 60,000 soldiers. Now NATO is a small mission, but they continue to be present. European Union has its military mission called Altea, still present in Bosnia and Herzegovina. But we are working with them. They are present in Bosnia. We are present in NATO structures, working and developing our plans for the future with the hope that we can join. Sooner we join both NATO and EU, I think that would mean more peace and more stability and more development for Bosnia and Herzegovina and for the benefit of all of us.
Just to make clear, Bosnia is comprised of two entities, the Republic of Srpska and
the Federation
of Bosnia.
Yes.
What's the political, do you have a parliamentary system, and does it oversee both entities? How does it work? What's the makeup of the political structure in Bosnia?
Bosnia and Herzegovina is state having two entities, as we call them. So Bosnia and Herzegovina has its presidency, as the highest authority, 3 members representing 3 major ethnic groups, Bosniak, Serb, Croat, members of the presidency. There is Council of Ministers, government on state level, ministries, and there is Parliamentary Assembly on state level with 2 houses, House of Representatives and House of People. House of People means 5 members from each major ethnic group. And each entity also has its own president and government and parliament. And federation as one entity has 10 cantons, each having prime minister and parliament. So it's quite complex system of governance in Bosnia and Herzegovina. There is also one part of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Brčko district, which has special status within Bosnia and Herzegovina and which has its own government and authorities. But that all creates quite a complex system of governance where for a decision to be made, you need consent of all sides. Or contrary, if somebody wants to block something, it's enough to have one.
Wow.
So quite a system which is complex, as I say, for making decisions. In some periods, with encouragement and involvement of internationals, we were able to make good progress and adopt significant legislation, establish new institutions and so on. But in some period, as I say, if there is opposition of even one actor, you can't make progress. And that situation in which we are now. Particularly is because of opposition from Republika Srpska for the present president and government from that entity.
Obviously, I mean, recent history and Bosnia, as well as various other European countries, were founded after the collapse of the Iron Wall and the failure, for instance, of Yugoslavia to hold, so it broke up into, and one of the entities was Bosnia. What are the remnants of the old communist rule? Are there any still? And I'm not talking about remnants in terms of buildings and the like. I mean, that's. But I'm talking in terms of culture, in terms of market practices, in terms of social practices. I'm talking about the real remnants of the old times. And do people look back to them in some sort of melancholy or some sort of nostalgia, looking upon them favorably?
Yeah, that's interesting question, because that's one part of the processes happening in Bosnia and Herzegovina in the last 30-year period. One part is transition from old system to the new system, from single-party system to multi-party system, from socialism to capitalism, let me say, transition of economy, of political system and all that. But there are different feelings, I need to say, among population about the past. Older generation usually remembers some things which were positive, let me say. It was stability.
Of course.
Of course, and it was certain security and development, which was in spite of everything happening there. On the other side, some people are critical about lack of freedom, lack of democracy during that period. And so, although Yugoslavia as such was specific compared to other countries included in the Eastern Socialist Bloc, more freedom was definitely there. So there is ongoing, I wouldn't say organized discussion, but you hear such statements on media networks, on social networks, and so people talking about it, remembering, some glorifying that period, some criticizing that period, and so on. But definitely about the future, there is big support for joining European Union.
Yeah.
People recognize benefits. Our overall trade and economic relations are mostly with the European Union. About 70%
Yeah.
export or import is with the European Union member states. So that's the future. If people are going to study, mostly going to European countries.
Right.
If tourists are coming very much from European Union, now from Islamic and Arab countries
Yeah.
specifically, also more and more visiting Bosnia and Herzegovina. So yes, there are strong links with European Union, and we see future of Bosnia and Herzegovina with the European Union.
Albeit that, I mean, one of the anomalies and, you know, one of the very frustrating things is that Bosnia is separated from the Mediterranean Sea by a very thin sliver of land. And therefore, Bosnia is, fascinatingly, is landlocked when it shouldn't be. Does the Mediterranean, does it have any kind of impact on Bosnia in terms of either trade or in terms of, you know, seeing yourself as part of a community that links somehow with North Africa?
Yeah, there are definitely influences of Mediterranean Sea and community, let me say, region felt in Bosnia and Herzegovina, together with influences from Central Europe and also influences from Turkey and Southeastern Europe. So it's mixture of all those influences that you can detect in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We have about 20 kilometers of coast, which is mostly used for touristic purposes.
Yeah.
Main port for Bosnian economy is in Croatia, and there is railroad connecting that port with Bosnia and Herzegovina and major industrial centers in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So that's our exit to the sea through port in Croatia. But yes, influences and traditional links are there because many companies in that period from Bosnia and Herzegovina were involved in projects in Algeria, in Libya, in a number of countries in Africa, in Middle East, and so on. And they are still keeping those links, and there are still some investment works or big projects implemented by Bosnian companies in those countries.
I mean, at the end, coming back to where we started, which is the dark times of the earlier 90s. I mean, obviously, this followed on from the Holocaust, where the entire world pledged never again and pledged that no one would be able to commit such horrors. Yet, you know, a few decades on, and Bosnia saw its own Holocaust and saw its own genocide. I fear, and this is something that I hear from either Bosnian friends or from my visit to Bosnia, I hear that the internal tensions make people uncomfortable. I wouldn't say more, make people uncomfortable. Things haven't returned to normal despite the peace agreement. They haven't returned to normal. Whether it be that kind of absence of closure and justice which you spoke of, whether it be the rise of nationalism surrounding Bosnia, whether it be in Hungary, whether it be in Central Europe, again, that rise of nationalism, rise of the far-right element within Europe. Do you also fear a sense that something might be lurking in the horizon, something that you need to collectively work against?
With the overall experience that we have, I think we need to be cautious. We need to look around and see what's happening around Bosnia and Herzegovina and wider Europe or wider world, if you want. But Bosnia and Herzegovina went through very difficult period and survived, continued to exist. And it was remarkable how quickly after peace agreement people started seeing each other, traveling, doing business, developing relations. And I think it's difficult to find similar example in the world that after such heavy, serious conflict with such consequences, destructions, such number of killed people and so on, people accept peace and establish freedom of movement and start certain relations and start working together in institutions, for example, of state level or in companies. And you have number of examples where companies in one entity of Bosnia and Herzegovina are hiring people from the other entity, or you have owners from one ethnic group employing people from the other ethnic group, and so on. And these are positive examples, and that's what gives hope for the overall situation and for the future of Bosnia and Herzegovina. But again, I say we can't keep our eyes closed to rising nationalism and also interests of some players traditionally present in the region. Why is Russia openly calling against Bosnia joining European Union or NATO? What is their interest there? I mean, when we are surrounded by countries which are already members of European Union and NATO.
Correct.
And I fear that it's part of the major relations between Russia and the West, Europe, USA specifically, which is reflected on Bosnia and Herzegovina. From our side, we want to play a positive role in all those relations. Bosnia and Herzegovina in no way makes situation in neighboring countries or in wider Europe, if you want, more difficult or worse in any way. There is no talk about organized mafia or crime from Bosnia and Herzegovina. There is no talk about organized or big migration, illegal migration,
money laundering,
or money laundering and such things which are present in world today, in Europe today. So I don't want to paint situation better than it is, but that's reality, and that's something which people need to have in mind when talking about Bosnia and Herzegovina. We are faced with issues, with problems. At the moment, working with international community, we achieved a lot in this period, and I think we need to continue to do more and to resolve these issues for benefit of all of us within Bosnia and Herzegovina and also in Europe and international community. We want to work jointly to make Bosnia a success story.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you. Thank you very much.